All right, y'all thought that I might be fibbing. This is proof right now. The Letterman Podcast, we have one sponsor only, but it is Rupert G and the Hello Deli. Thank you very much for sponsoring our show, Rupert.
It's my honor, Mike.
La, la, la. Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. All right, I'm excited for this episode. Mike, you're excited for all the episodes. Yes, I'm excitable. It's just the way that I am, and I love doing this. I love doing this show. I get excited for every single guest that we have here. This guy is fantastic, and you'll hear it in the I'll get to it real quick. His name is Chris Schieman. Chris hosts a podcast. So it's two podcast hosts getting together, and I think that's always fun. It's like when Doctor Strange and Iron Man showed up on screen for the first time together in an Avengers movie. It's interesting alchemy when you get a couple of hosts together to go over things. Chris hosts a podcast called "There's Too Many Podcasts." It's a podcast about podcasts. It's him talking and picking the brain of other podcast hosts, which I think is an absolute genius premise. He actually had me on his show as a guest, and that was a lot of fun. And he loves Letterman so much and has some really hardwired emotional connections to Dave and company. And so we get to talk about that a little bit more here, where on his show, he kind of picked my brain. Good luck. But here I get to pick his brain. And he's been a broadcaster forever, influenced to become a broadcaster because of Dave. And it was just a really fun conversation. This is a very important part of the Letterman Podcast and our DNA is bringing on people who've been influenced by the show and touched by the show in some way, the community, as we like to call them. Chris Schieman, certainly a member of that. I appreciate every single person that reaches out, thoughtfully or even carelessly, whatever, for everything that we do. We've got our group on Facebook. Please like, share, subscribe, all that crap. We appreciate it very, very much. But if you don't, that's okay. We're going to do the show anyway. So without further ado, the Letterman Podcast is proud to present my conversation with Chris Schieman, host of There's Too Many Podcasts. Chris, I'm stoked that you're here. And before you say a word, I want to make an observation, probably not profound by any stretch of the imagination. But, I think about a guy like Neil Brennan, who is a legend in comedy, both as a writer, Chappelle's Show, and then he decided to go out and realize how amazing he is on his own as a stand-up, as these other things. Yeah. He started his podcast, Blocks. The very first guest is David Letterman in my opinion, one of the best interviews that Dave has done in modern history, talking about the late night wars and all that sort of stuff. It's an amazing, amazing thing. You come out, been a broadcaster for a long time, decide to start There's Too Many Podcasts. It's a podcast about podcasts, and a genius premise, by the way. I love the
Thanks
premise.
for saying it like that. You nailed it.
Thank you. Been working on it. And your first guest on the show, you picked me. And now the way that I would compare these two ships that are floating in the universe, the very small escape craft that is us in our situation versus the behemoth mothership that is Brennan and Letterman. I feel it's apropos. And I was the first guest on your show. I love the premise of There's Too Many Podcasts. I love the fact that that you are going out there and literally picking the brain of other podcasters out there. Welcome to the Letterman Podcast. We're going to talk about your history and how much you love Dave and how much you've been influenced by it. But welcome here. And how is the podcast going?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me in what I'm sure is going to be the lowest rated episode you've ever done. I really appreciate that.
It doesn't matter if you don't know how to comprehend numbers. And that's the way I look at this whole thing. So no worries.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the love of God, this man is scraping at the bottom of the barrel. I am officially it. This is it.
Well, and there's a few others that are going to be last year in the summertime. We did the summer intern series, and we had a few episodes in a row of folks who were interns for the show and for one of the shows, either late night or late show, and had moved on into whatever they moved on into. But they still talk about it as it being their most meaningful experience in their life, and it profoundly changed the trajectory of where they are. This summer here, it's actually broadcasters. I've got a list of people who went into broadcasting and certainly recognized the through line of David Letterman's productions as a center point or major influence, it's very, very, very apparent that is the case with you, right?
Yeah, it is. And to go back to your original question, the podcast is going. Let's
Yeah.
let's let's put a period in. I started this podcast that Mike has accurately described to you. It's about podcast, and I talk to different people who host podcasts, and I try to find some interesting and different and unique things about it. But it's going. Your numbers were very good. It's kind of been amazing how few guests will actually promote their appearance. For somebody who works in broadcasting, you will talk to other broadcasters. That anxiety that takes over, like, did I piss them off? Like
Yep.
Dave, when he couldn't get Tom Cruise to come on or Oprah to come on.
Yep.
So, I wanted to put something out there because I've done a lot of sports broadcasting, and I want people to see that I can do something else other than that. So that's really the main goal of that podcast, and that's been accomplished. Well or not, I don't know, but it's out there. And now where were we? Were we talking about
No,
Dave?
no, no. We're going to stay in your broadcasting lane for a second here because you've been doing this for a long time. Let's talk exactly the lane that you have been in. You've been a sports broadcaster. And are you talking play by play? Are we talking color? Are we talking hosting shows and bumpering things, or what? What's your
I don't
experience with
like
that?
I don't like hosting shows in sports. I don't like talking about the games before the games. I don't like talking about the games after the games. So I'm
Yep.
straight up a play by play person. And it's interesting you mentioned you're going to talk to a lot of broadcasters this summer because I know a lot who work in the sports world who are fans of Dave. Will DeBoer, who's a minor league baseball guy, he was when Twitter was still a thing before it became whatever it is now. We kind of talked and shared Letterman stories and things like that very often. So there are a lot of people in broadcasting, and there's a surprising amount of people in sports broadcasting that really owe their chops in part to Dave. There's lots of different people. I'm a historian of. I consider myself a broadcaster first.
Yes.
The reason why I did the podcast is because nobody else does. They consider me a sports broadcaster, but I consider myself a broadcaster first, same way that Dave did. So I
Yes.
study it. I studied the history of, I go back and I find old clips of Betty White when she was doing that freeform early days of talk show TV, daytime TV in California in like the early 50s.
Mm-hmm.
From them to Steve Allen to Jack Parr. Johnny Carson, believe it or not so much. I I do like Johnny, and I have a lot in common in my personal self with Johnny Carson.
Sure.
But I view him as kind of the old Hollywood, the same way I think a lot of Letterman fans do. But what he accomplished is remarkable, and his impact on Letterman is no doubt the most important thing for Dave. So
Yep.
I understand him from that perspective. And it is kind of nice to go back and watch those shows and see the old Hollywood like that. But it's just not for me. It's not something I get entertained by. So, but I do study him. I study all of them, even the ones I like, I don't like, you know, and I kind of formulated my abilities from that. But it's really important to me that these kinds of things like what you're doing exist because being able to talk about broadcasting is one of my favorite things. It really, really is.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's also a serendipity thing. Like again, one of the things that I'm trying to do with this show, and I think I sort of mentioned it on my appearance on your show, which I love that conversation very, very much. I thought we had a fantastic time, and I think I mentioned that like one of the things that I want to do is just really open it up and let organically things flow and things happen. I know that you're wanting to do that with your podcast as well. There's a certain beauty to that when you don't really have an outcome except for the process itself, and having these things kind of organically sort of all come into place. All these broadcasters that I'm planning on having on this summer, and I mean, don't get me wrong, we got Anton Fig coming on, and a few other really
Yeah,
cool
Anton.
Letterman. Yeah, we got Anton Zip. We have a few, Letterman folk who worked for the show that are coming on too. So I'm going to interlace everybody. But it's funny how folks in television production and folks in like I think about Darren Cox, who's been on, he's on our very first episode, in fact, and he's been in television for decades. And a lot of the folks in the control room, in the studio, they all bond over Letterman. And it's so interesting how this guy who started in radio, started in small time TV, and then went and got the rub from the guy who started as a host of other things, right? And it's funny how, Letterman took so much of that from Johnny and incorporated it in. But you're right, he's a broadcaster first. And a lot of broadcasters feel that way. I know that every time you read a Bill Carter book or a book about Letterman where they talk about, oh, he's not a comedian, he's a broadcaster. People have heard that, but I don't know that it's really been gone down the path where to the point where it's beaten to death, where we can talk about it. And that's one of the reasons why I think all these broadcasters gravitate towards him. It's just, a fisherman can always recognize another fisherman.
We all wanted to be Dave. We all wanted to do that talk show. That's, that was my first goal. Sitting there and watching it with my dad, I pointed to it and I said, that's what I want. But the reality is not everybody does. And around that time you had to suck up to Lorne Michaels anyways. And who wants to do that? So, the opportunities.
We could name a few people who
not me, but there's a lot of different avenues is what I'm saying. And the other thing that I did come to the realization was that I didn't really have anything to offer. I mean, look at me. I got the gap tooth. Everything that I was doing was kind of just emulating Letterman anyways. I didn't have a lot of original ideas myself. So when I came to that realization, that's when the world kind of opened up and I said, okay, well, what can I do? A guy like Dave did the hardest thing possible. He got in that ugly ass truck.
Yep.
I think he still has.
Yep.
And he drove to California. And for somebody as anxious as him, I can only imagine what doing stand-up was like.
Yep.
But he did that. My approach was to say, okay, what's the easiest route? And the easiest route really is sports.
Right.
There are tons of small colleges in the United States now that are really struggling, and a lot of them are closing their doors. Yeah. But there's still thousands of them. There's every town has a team. Every community has a team. I don't particularly like doing high school sports, but it's there if you need it. You can do that.
If you want to sharpen your teeth, you can.
Yeah. Or just there's plenty of people. The best sports broadcaster on the planet is probably some guy calling 6-man football in some desert town in Texas.
Yep.
Who's been doing it for 80 years or whatever.
Yeah. But hasn't connected dots to do anything else. Well, yeah. But hasn't connected dots to necessarily go and do anything else because, to do the hardest thing, like what you said, like what Dave did. I mean, that's the extreme example, but there's a lot of people out there, they don't put together, putting together a nice CV or a demo reel or whatever, and the ambition and the permission for the ambition to send that out and to do the things that would help them grow into that. I love what you just said. I think you're bang on.
You have to, you have to understand yourself. You have to look at yourself, what you're capable of and what you want out of life. And not chase that ego and chase that narcissism that if I'm not at ESPN, which I hate ESPN to begin with, I wouldn't want to work with them. But, if I'm not at ESPN, if I'm not David Letterman's replacement, I'm nothing. There's a number of ways, especially nowadays, where you can have a career in broadcasting, and it's extremely difficult to tell kids who are in broadcasting schools these things because they all think they're going to be the next Seth Meyers now or the next I don't even know who the people are, whatever robot they're cranking out at ESPN that all sound the same. But you don't have to go that route. You can be yourself, and you can probably tell in the sound of my voice I'm a little bit rebellious to begin with.
Yeah.
I don't fit under that corporate mold. And so being able to carve out my own little side of the industry and be able to sustain it I've been doing it for 20 years. I started in radio.
Yep.
And then I went off on my own in 2010, and I haven't really looked back since then.
And so that being said, I want to, so this is good. We've painted a really nice picture here. You mentioned earlier your dad, and that hits my heart in a lot of ways right now. I know you lost him. Is it 4 years ago you lost dad?
It'll be 5 years ago in 2 days.
Okay, so we're almost 5 years. I'm in the process
Mm-hmm.
right now of helping my dad come to grips with some dementia stuff. And my dad has had an amazing transformation in his life. And I mean, my other podcast, my men's mental wellness podcast, I've had him on 3 times. And all 3 of those times I have this amazing, like the first episode, he talked about his battles with anger and things like that. And my dad has turned into a completely different guy from 50, he's 73 now, from 50 to 73, he turned into a completely different guy. And we talked about that. And the second episode, we talked about, he had a heart attack and identity as a man. And the third one is my dad and I talking with him mostly lucid about what he's going through and what he knows he's going through right now. And I have these conversations in beautiful HD, and they're there for me forever as long as I have them.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing thing. And I pick up a lot of wisdom from people when they talk about when they lost their dad. And with you yourself, your dad directly, indirectly, I think it's safe to say directly, is the reason that you became a fan of David Letterman. Is that not the case?
Yeah, Dad watched him in the 80s, and because of this, he used to always joke that Dave was my real dad, and my mom ran off to New York and had an affair, which,
And how old were you when he was telling you this? How old were you when he was telling you this?
I was like 11 or 12. Yeah.
Our oldest,
I knew he was joking. Yeah, okay. I knew he was joking.
All right.
But
well, that's good, because our oldest told our youngest that there was a middle brother that was sent off to Vancouver because we didn't like him. And he was convinced of it for a few years. There was a Corey. Corey was around, and I love that story. So Dad would say that. That's fantastic. But the way that you described it to me, though, was that Dad wanted to find something for you two to bond with. And for me, like with my granddaughter, if I get her into something, like when we go to see a hockey game live, or if we go to see, like, I've shown her some Letterman clips already, like dropping stuff off buildings and stuff, and I like to get the reaction from her. She's 6, but if she were to attach to this, it's one of the greatest feelings in the world. It feels like Dad was really trying to get you into something that he was into in a way that you guys could bond. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the way I put it when we last talked was, how do you as a parent bond with a 13, 14-year-old? What do you have in common? Yeah. And for my dad, he kind of recognized that snarkiness in me. And my dad was fascinated by TV, as most boomers were. They were put in front of TVs and raised on TV. So he was fascinated by it. And that was around the time of the late night wars, when everybody was fascinated by it. And I got into it. And yeah, it was a way for us, when curfew came and Dad had to pick me up from whatever girl's house I was striking out at. It was time to go home, and we would watch Dave, and then we would watch Saturday Night Live on Saturday nights.
That's fantastic.
And like I said, everything in my life from those nights together, everything has led to this point. It's all connected, and it all goes back to just my dad saying, let me get a pizza with this kid and just see if this will work,
And work it did. You're also Midwestern, right? Like it's funny. There's a kinship from the Midwest guys and gals out there with Dave. There's like an ownership almost that's there. People love to identify with the fact that, it's one of their own, like not just Letterman, but Carson, some of these other people from the Midwest, Cabot, who've made it big. You're a Midwest guy as well.
Yeah. Cleveland, Ohio, which, Dave's got a lot of connections to Cleveland with his staff. I think even going back to Bob Borden is from Cleveland, and his wife is from Cleveland. So, a Midwest guy knows a Midwest gal.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of broadcasters that come out of the Midwest. It was put to me in college that we have a certain dialect, we have a certain accent that is most pleasing to people. Ours is fairly neutral. So I think that's part of the reason why you see that. Although sometimes I don't consider Cleveland to be Midwest. We're very much a Great Lakes. We've got more in common in this city with a city like Philadelphia or even a southern city like Memphis than we do with Nebraska, with even Indiana, our next door neighbors. I don't feel that same kinship with, but it is technically, technically the accent, and that's why this is kind of a breeding ground for broadcasters, is what I'm told anyways.
That's very interesting. Where did you go to school?
I went to Cleveland State here for a couple of years, and I tried to start a sports broadcasting on the radio there, and they flat out rejected it. So I transferred then to Bowling Green. Bowling Green is one of the, what they were at the time. There is no sports radio anymore there, but at the time we were the largest in the country. We did all of the games. So it was great to be able to go there and to be able to practice and still be 2 hours away to do laundry once a month.
Yeah, that's an amazing proving ground and getting your chops. Were you the guy that like when Dave was a straight man when it came to this stuff? Well, I mean, when you read Zinnemann's book and he talks about, Dave in college radio, he was always a rabble rouser. But even like when he was a straight man, like the weatherman on the local affiliate, he threw in humor, that kind of a stuff. I assume that you are that guy doing play-by-play whenever it is possible for you to be it. Did that start right away, or did a level of comfort have to show up before you could do that?
Yeah, I've been called unprofessional from day one because of that. Because as a play-by-play guy, you're not supposed to be part of the story. You're really, really not. By the definition of being a play-by-play guy, you describe what's going on around you. You describe the players. You talk about stats. That is not what I do. Well, I do that, but I believe, again, as a broadcaster, that my sense to and my responsibility to the audience is extreme entertainment. I want these people to be happy. I don't know what's going on in their lives. I don't know what kind of day they had. I don't know, who they are and what state of mind that they're in, but I know that I want to be damn sure that when they tune in, that they are having a great time, not a good time, a great time. And I still kind of have that mindset of Dave when the ratings started to slip for Dave, and you could see him start to frustrate when he would have a bad day. You knew he had a bad day.
Yeah.
It was visible on the broadcast that he had a bad day, and I'm very much like that. My difference is I will usually turn it around into entertainment somehow.
Right.
For example, I work with a lot of small schools, and small schools have to employ students to run the cameras, and the students are sometimes awake and sometimes they're not awake.
Yep.
So if I feel that brooding sense, I'll make it entertaining. I'll say, okay, now we're looking at the ceiling, folks, and how many tiles can we count? Because our camera person is asleep. I'm up to 40. How many do you have at home? And things like that when I am aggravated that the broadcast is not going how I want it to,
Right.
but still keeping in mind that, okay, what's my responsibility to the audience in this point and at this moment? And that is to make sure that they're having a good time.
What sports are your favorite? Like, what sports have you done, and what's your favorite?
Uh, you know, um, I'll do anything for money. Um, I think as we learn more and we discover more about football and what it does to the brain, I've kind of pulled back from that a little bit. I've got all these stupid ethics in my head. So it's hard to make that justification because I do a lot of soccer too, and soccer is very dangerous. There's no helmets in soccer, and there's people's heads are colliding all the time in soccer. People don't really realize that because 90% of it is so boring, but the 10% is very violent. And that could cause real harm too. But as far as favorites, I really enjoy basketball. Basketball has been a part of my life for my whole life. It's something my friends and I, speaking of football, he'll love this. Head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, Jonathan Gannon, was one of my great buddies growing up. And I thought he would be an NBA guy, and he's an NFL guy. He's a head coach in the NFL. I never saw that coming, but he's a huge basketball fan. And he and I and my other friends from grade school would bond over that. And so I really love basketball in the way that you love hockey.
Yep.
And then I also love baseball. I don't get to broadcast a lot of baseball, but I love baseball because you can really be goofy with baseball. You can kind of do whatever you want with baseball because there's so much downtime that it's just great fun. But I don't have any that, are not favorites. I don't know a lot of sports. I'm not a big person. I don't understand water polo. I don't think I could broadcast that effectively. Same thing with golf. Volleyball, I really, really enjoy because volleyball is a lot like basketball. It's very fast paced and entertaining to me. So I like to do volleyball as well, but basketball is my love.
Do you have signature sayings, bits, things like that? Like I think about some of my favorite hockey broadcasters. Sometimes they would have a catchphrase for a certain player or a certain play or a certain event within the sporting world. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, no. I really don't. I'm looking at myself in this thing. Boy, I just look tired. I look like I need it. I didn't get that nap beforehand and things are looking off.
Well, that's no. It's fine.
All right. Anyways,
you're good. You're good.
You know what I like to do, honestly, with my broadcasts, and I always give credit where credit is due when I do this. I will use phrases from my mentors. I mentioned my disdain for ESPN. One of the reasons why I have a disdain is because they're just creating these factory style broadcasts.
Yeah.
We grew up here in the Midwest, Harry Carey, Jack Buck, Ernie Harwell. There were so many great broadcasting personalities. Vince Scully over on the coast. I mean, and there's so many more.
Well, think about Bob Uecker or guys like that.
Yeah, and he's still doing it. He's still out there. I love it. But yeah, Clevelanders have mixed feelings about Bob Uecker. There was debate when the Cleveland, at that time, Indians were in the World Series that Bob Uecker and Bob Costas had a Yankees bias. I don't think these guys care. In fact, I know they don't because I don't care. People think I do. I don't. I don't care who wins. I care that my check clears. But there was individuality. So I always try to incorporate some of my heroes into my broadcast. Joe Tate from the Cleveland Cavaliers would always, when he was describing a play, dribbles into the circle, into the lane, puts it up, puts it in. You could describe exactly, you could visualize what was happening. And I always use that. And then if I have a timeout and I've got time to kill, I'll say, by the way, when I said this, it was Joe Tate. He was from the Cleveland Cavaliers and a wonderful person and a fabulous broadcaster. And I steal so much from the West Coast guys too, Vince Scully and Kurt Gowdy. I don't think is a West Coast guy, but I steal from him too. But trying to pay homage to the legends because this younger generation just does not know who these people are anymore. And again, being that historian of broadcasting, I want to keep that going. So yeah, that's my roundabout way of saying that all my sayings are stolen for people, Mike, and I'm very proud to be ripping them off.
I think that's Aaron Sorkin in I think it might have been an episode of The West Wing now that I think about it, or in one of his shows. And the thing I love about Sorkin is whenever he had a writer for a character, I think it was West Wing because he had speech writers in that show. The quote that he puts into their mouth was a good writer steals, lifts things every once in a while. A great writer flat out plagiarizes the good stuff. And I think the same thing can be said in broadcasting as well. I mean, iron sharpens iron, right? And influences are a good thing. Like I would love, like, for example, to bring it back to Letterman, I love how he brings out old lines, like he'll bring out a line from the 40s that somebody said, or old Carson jokes.
I was watching.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was watching one of his clips and he talked about Lux Radio Theater. And this was like in 1997, 98. It was one of those clips that the Letterman people posted. And I said, who is going to get this reference but us?
Yeah. He did one in his very final goodbye. The last show, May 20th of 2015, he was going through and he was thanking everybody. And this is like at the end, he's about to do the final thank you and goodnight and introduce the Foo Fighters. And so he's going through the list of people or whatever. And he gets to the part where they talk about the Ed Sullivan Theater being renovated. I don't even understand this reference, but I know it because he talked about how many rats were in the Ed Sullivan Theater. And he said, oh, and by the way, the rats, they were stoop shouldered. Now I'd have no idea where that came from or what, but I do know I talked to Shecky before. He's like, oh yeah, it's an old reference. Like I forget where he told me where it was, but I can't recall it. But like even his final address to everybody, he pulls out a reference from who God knows where. And does that. That's one of the things I love about Dave, doing things like that.
Yeah, he's so much more intelligent than he gives himself credit for. That was one of the reasons why I knew I couldn't do what he did. His vocabulary is just so sharp. And even when they do their little silly things on the Barbara Gaines show now, he still got that at 70, whatever he is now. I can't remember.
Old. Yeah, 77.
Yeah.
He pulls out words that I have no idea what they mean still, but I want to know what they mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back for a second here and talk about Dad bringing you up with Letterman as a kid. I certainly can relate to that. And one of the things that I've tried to relay to some of these people who made the show. Like there are people, because the people, and I think we talked about this when I appeared on your show, but there's this element within the staffers themselves of it's humbleness to a fault, because, I'll say something like, this show shaped me. Like I try and make a point of every single time I run into a staffer that I'm able to, if it's the first time, I say, hey, thank you for helping form me into the odd human that I am. I'll say a sentence like that. And it's 100% legitimate and from the heart, because I'm a little kid watching what they busted their ass to get on the TV every night. And it was odd. Like the word Dave likes to use is many times it was esoteric. Like, and it, our cement is wet at that point, really, really wet. Like, oh yeah, this is the greatest in the world. And your dad intentionally did that with you to create a bonding moment with him. But then you're seeing this oddness, and folks with, you're I think you're an 81 baby, right? Or an 82 baby?
But...
82 baby. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you had a lot of late show. And people say to me all the time, oh, late night, it had all the strange stuff or the odd stuff or whatever. You didn't see a lot of the old late night stuff back then, but you grew up with late show, a lot of odd stuff in that show too, especially considering it was an 11:30 show.
Yeah. Late night was odd in a different way. It started from the genius of Meryl Marco, who was extremely art forward. And I love her for that. And I love everything. Do you read her? She did.
I'm gonna interrupt you right now, just in case, because we won't get back to it. Do you read her Substack?
No, I didn't know she had one.
I just gave you an incredible gift. Her Substack is so entertaining because many, if not most of them, are text and then her art, like graphic novel art that has nothing to do with superheroes, and the art is hilarious, and she's using it, and the wit is everything, and it's everything combined, and she puts out one every week, one every couple of weeks, whatever. I just gave you a gift. Meryl Marco's Substack is incredible, and I highly recommend it to everybody here. So anyway, please continue.
I'm so in love with Meryl Marco, and she's an artist, and those are the ones that I attract to a fault. But but yeah, Meryl Marco did wonderful things. And then Steve O'Donnell did wonderful things. But for me, coming in around that time, and just the energy and the wackiness from, the Bays and Thomas and all of the things that they did. And Jerry Mulligan, I knew every Friday night, I was miserable high school. I hated high school, but I knew every Friday night that Jerry was going to come out in a dress, or he was going to do a dance, or he was going to do something stupid. And God almighty, Jerry, you got me through high school with that stupid nonsense. My favorite was Janet Reno, but I just watched one the other day. They just posted where he was one of the Irish dance things that was popular around that time. They did and he was dancing uncomfortably. And I mean, it was silly. And there was a point, as Dave would say, let's all enjoy a tasty beverage. But
I'm in.
there
I'm
was a
in.
point. There was a point when the Late Show started, when he was on top of the world,
Yep.
and the comedy was great. Don't get me wrong, and having all the celebrities was great, and that Madonna interview was great, and
Yep.
everybody was talking about it. And then he went through this. I call it, when I'm sad, my emo phase. And that's when, Leno started to win in the ratings. It was
Yep.
clearly affecting him. It was affecting the show. And that came at a time when I was 14, 13, 14 and brooding myself. So I connected with Dave on that level too. I referenced it earlier.
Hmm.
And then they kind of got back to it and they got wacky. And that's when I really think they really found their footing again. Like I said, Carter Bays, Craig Thomas, I
Absolutely.
love those guys so
Yeah,
much.
Mike.
They're
Actually,
just,
with the new season of How I Met Your Mother, I'm trying to get them both on at the same time. Actually, that's going to be that'll be a lot of fun to have them on here because they've both been
yeah.
guests. They've both been guests already, and we've said let's come back. I want to have them on at the same time, and now it's a really nice time to do that with the new season coming out.
Speaking of guests, I haven't watched the Shannon one. I can't wait to watch that, because that's the other thing that Letterman did as he got older and realized, hey, I don't want to be running around all the time. How
Yep.
can I still do a show?
Yep.
And it became very consistent and predictable in the best possible way
Yep.
at a time in my life where I really needed that predictability every night. I
Yes.
was a mess uh, in my 20s, and this was around the time that the show was ending, and knowing that if I saw Shannon's name pop up and Alan Coulter announced her, I knew, okay, it's either summertime or it's Christmas. Darlene Love, every single year.
Yes.
That was part of our Christmas tradition. The
Absolutely.
Guess the Pies thing. I mean, my God, I see those things now, and it literally brings out heavy emotions in me, because those were such consistent things, and they were for us,
Yes.
and they were for the show. And that's one of the things he did so well, and the show did so well. When they quit caring about beating Leno, they said, okay, let's make this for the people who are watching.
Yep.
And it became something really, really consistent and reliable and wonderful and fun.
I could not agree more. All of those, Shannon, you're going to enjoy Shannon's episode a lot. There's a couple little surprising tidbits that come out of it that people are going to be, that people already are. When they get back, I love that my show is our show here is a slow burn. I love that we don't market it. I love that it's just when people find it, and then I'll get, I'll get odd reach outs from an episode that happened a year and a half ago. Like I'll get odd reach outs about,
Yeah.
Steve O'Donnell part 2 or different things. This is one that there's going to be a lot of as people find it. It's like a little gift because Shannon is just electric and she's bright and she's just got this amazing charisma. I can hear you. Are you okay? You okay over there? I see you
Yeah,
adjusting.
I'm
Okay.
fine. If you don't want to work for ESPN, ladies and gentlemen, that's fine. You can follow your own path like me, but you're not getting the beats. You're
No,
getting the dollar store buds that don't quite stay in.
but
That's the trade-off.
they look phenomenal. But one thing with Shannon is she said when the segment was created, the whole thing was the idea of giving Dave a place to go other than the desk. But like you said, by this point he's in his 50s or his maybe even his 60s. He's not running around the
Mhm.
street unless Billy Eichner can only come on every once in a while and make him run around the street or whatever.
Yeah.
He can't do it anymore. So let's find ways to get Dave out from behind the desk. And this is that segment was so just to your point, that's exactly right. It's such a predictable thing for me. One of the things that I love to watch, because it was something that was a holdover from the late night days, was every single time he brought on one of his old friends, like Tom Dreesen or Jeff
Yeah.
Altman or some of these other folks who would come on the show. Tim Thomerson doing the Tales from the Old West, which is just to me one of the greatest. I loved that reoccurring. What the hell is this bit? And and it's using it's his delivery was so perfect. And Tim, I'm trying to get Tim on the show here too. That's the stuff that I loved. Like you said, it was the comfort food. Listening to Jay Thomas talk about do the Lone Ranger story every year, as part of that wind up to the holiday season.
Yeah.
Just that's the stuff that we're in our formative years as this is all happening. The earlier versions of this, and it helped form us. Formulative form. They're the same thing. It helped form us. Like I have I'm a financial planner by trade, and I do not fit in many respects because, you've got all
Yeah.
these conventional people around, and I'm kind of looking around and I'm wanting to take the straightness and just kind of make it go askew a little bit here. And it's in me, like whether I'm with my granddaughter at a parent teacher interview or wherever I am, it's this thing. And I have to blame Dave's and company for it. I'm pretty sure, but I'm so grateful for it because I feel like I'm viewing life in color, or at least a different set of colors. And it's more present and whatnot. And so every time I talk to one of these people, I thank them for it, but it formed who I am.
Yeah, and some of that for me has been good. Some of it maybe not so good because if you choose to become a broadcaster, I really think it can choose you because you have to be a certain type. Dave talks about therapy and finally getting into therapy.
Mm-hmm.
We are, and Gary Shandling did such an amazing job putting this in front of our face, what it's really like behind the scenes with the Larry Sanders Show.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody who works in broadcasting, if you're going to talk to a lot of broadcasters this summer, you might need some Xanax by the time the night's through, because if they're worth their weight in gold, they are, we're a neurotic bunch of people, really and truly. But it's that neuroticism, and it's that maybe a place of depth
Mm-hmm.
that makes the show what it is, and made Dave make the show what it is. Because going back to what I said, I take this very seriously. I'm very goofy, and like I said, people really do call me unprofessional all the time. People within the industry,
The straight
not
laced
my
folk.
audience.
Yeah, no, these are my colleagues in my financial planning office. Same thing.
Right.
Every week, there's not a week that goes by
Yeah.
before somebody doesn't roll their eyes at me for how I'm dressed or something that's in my office or whatever. Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, I can relate to what you're
Yeah.
saying.
It's exactly that. There are people in broadcasting nowadays who, quite frankly, don't know anything about what they're doing. It's just it's sanitized and it's become corporatized. But for me, it's this neediness, I think, in a way, to just going back to how I started talking about it. I feel like it's my responsibility to the audience to be good and to be on and to be entertaining for them. And the feedback that I get from my audience is almost universally positive, and I form those same kind of bonds with my audience in a much smaller and more personal way than Letterman did with his fans. But the real broadcasters, the people who really care about this industry, are some brooding, dark and disturbed people. And I think part of the reason why we have this need to say, okay, I've got to entertain these people, is because we don't want people to feel what we feel. We want them to have that joy and that entertainment. And that's something that I always kind of think about, within the industry itself. And I know that was within Dave. And that was one of the things, like I said, when he was going through his troubles is when I really started to get into him. And that was a time when a lot of people were tuning out, but I was tuning in deeper because I said, I get this guy. I understand this. This is something that I can relate to. And there's a lot of broadcasters who I don't know if they've ever gone to this thought process or not. But, a lot of people my age who are working in broadcasting, I bet, have the same time frame as I did.
Yep. I appreciate what you just said there because I can certainly relate to it in many respects. It's funny, millennials and Gen Zers or whatever, they look at our generation, they look at Gen X, like and it's so funny because I remember Gen X used to look at the baby boomers and criticize and be snarky and be sarcastic and apathetic and all of these things.
And now we
And
all look at the baby boomers because they don't die ever.
sure, well, yeah, no, they certainly don't. They love to take that spotlight and just hold it fixated on them, don't they? And
Oh, the comments.
but you know, these generations that look at us and they don't realize that back then, no, you know what? Like we gave birth to grunge, motherfucker. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like we were rebellious too. And to me, Dave was one of those guys. He was those people that stood out that got us to follow that. You talking about it in broadcasting is very interesting. I dig that. I dig that point of view and that perspective very much. I'm super curious now that you've kind of made the jump to podcasting. The difference is obviously the topics are different. You know, you're coming in inquisitive versus I'm going to set the stage to everything that's going on. There's one other part I want to ask you about as well, just about you, and then we can talk as much Dave as we want. Is at some point for Dave, you know, he went to chase the dream and the idea of falling back on a kind of a writer position or something like that. He had the background in broadcasting would tell people I'm a writer, that sort of a thing. You became a broadcaster, but you've always had this, it seems to me, you've always had this entrepreneurial streak as well. And for me, I had to become an entrepreneur. The way that I became an entrepreneur was by chasing a dream. I wanted to chase a dream to do something. That was kind of how I gave myself permission to break out of the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 kind of a fold. You've had businesses and started your own personal things, your own side hustles, that sort of a thing. Where did that come from? Did you always have that?
It comes from that rebelliousness, honestly.
Yep.
You know, my goal was to be in radio. I was going to be, I'm not a good host. I'm good at playing off of people. So that's what I do really well. So I thought, you know, this was back in like the 2003 to 2006 radio when everything was extreme, you know, Limp Bizkit and Shock Jocks and things like that. So at the time, that's what I thought. Okay, I could be the wacky side guy, and you know, chip in. And that is what I did with radio for a couple of years. And then I go back to what Jimmy Kimmel always said about his time in radio, that the worst people he ever met in radio, it was in radio. And that rang true. The other thing that happened to me was a great recession. The economy tanked for those of us my age. I literally had to blow up my life, and I was taking minimum wage jobs just to have something to do. Which turned out to be a good thing because I had do nothing jobs that I didn't care about, but it gave me a couple of years to say, okay, the plan is not going to be the plan anymore, dude. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And the reality is there's a little bit of fear, I think, ingrained to people my age because of what the recession did to us.
Yep.
So I said to myself, first, I don't want to rely on anybody but myself again. Now, you have clients, you have to, if you're a financial planner and you're not delivering that 6 to 8%, you're not going to have clients anymore. But you know, you are the guy. So, you know, you always have responsibility to people, but I don't have a boss telling me if my work is done that I can't go home or things like that. So it's, my dad was very rebellious. My dad once told me in 3rd grade that if the teacher ever says you can't go to the bathroom when you have to go to the bathroom, you get up in front of that class and you pee right on the carpet. My dad said that to me in 3rd grade. So that instills a little the system. So I have that, and I think that was natural. The fear of getting another job and having to get fired again motivated me. And the realization that if I was going to do broadcasting the way that I was going to do it, I wasn't going to make good money, and I needed to figure something out that I had passion for, that I liked to do. So everything that I do is a part of my business. I'm not here to promote my business, but everything that I do is related somewhat to what I enjoy about broadcasting. So video production, marketing stuff, things that allow me still to be creative, or at times things that allow me to be mundane so that I can be creative at 7 p.m. when the basketball game starts. and I've just kind of been able to formulate it into this life for myself that is, hmm, it's fun. It's a lot of fun, but you have to really want to go this route. You have to enjoy the invoices as much as you enjoy the high from a comment from a fan who says you're doing a great job. You have to enjoy those two things equally.
Yeah.
And you have to really, really want to do it. And you have to be able to survive when things go wrong, because
Yeah.
lots of things go wrong when you're on your own. Lots of things. You do a lot of stupid things at the beginning that you either learn from or you get scared and you collapse.
Hmm.
But again, my whole thing is not relying on other people. So every time I make a mistake, I can learn from it. Versus if I have a boss and that boss makes a mistake and he doesn't learn from it, the
Hmm.
company is crippled. So it's rebelliousness and fear, which is very interesting that kind of formulated, and just passions. All three of those things led to me doing it how I do it now.
And a very easy through line, an argument could be made for Dave. Give us a blueprint for that. He decided not to be the conventional weatherman. He decided not to take that job in Minnesota, and
Right.
for the same money, but to get him out there, around there, the way a lot of radio guys did, or a lot of broadcast people did. They'd go to different markets or whatever, and hopefully they start growing that way in the conventional system. No, I'm gonna go tell everybody I'm a writer. I'm going to go to, because that's more palpable. I'm going to go to California. I'm going to try stand up just to learn the discipline, just to get the skill under my belt, because, my ultimate job is one that I don't even like saying out loud because it's so outlandish that this could ever even happen. You mentioned it when we talked on the other day, the rebellious nature about Dave. Game shows. He tanked
He
a bunch
tanked
of
it.
game shows,
I've
right?
tanked things before too. Yep.
Oh, I love
And
hearing that. See, that's that rebellious thing. And go ahead.
the interesting thing when we talk about rebellion in this way is what Dave did with his show was flip it upside down. There's a lot of people. It's different at different stages of your life. When you're in your 20s, you think
Yes.
that, like Dave said with the morning show, they thought they were going to be TV's great savior. You think that you're going to not only disrupt, but you're going to topple. You're going to take
Oh,
down.
yes.
I hear that a lot from younger people nowadays, that what they have to learn is you have to work within the system. You have to work through the system. And that's the thing that Dave did really well. He did it his own way,
Yep.
but he did it with the corporate sponsors, and he did it in part because Johnny wouldn't let him do other things.
Yep. Yep.
So, the best way to make change, honestly, is really within the system. And David Letterman, oddly enough, is a great example of that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, gathering the for lack of a better term, the power that he did to be able to go over to CBS, own 2 hours in late night, for 20 something years, and basically have, I don't want to say, unlimited control, but pretty darn close. We've had some of the network people on this show, and they were following whatever Worldwide Pants said, and that
Hmm.
is remarkable, when you think about it. And then, of course, being the gateway to the accessibility to the late night show, and all of these late night hosts that exists right now, better or worse, as a direct result of the clearing in the jungle that Dave and his band of machete wielding crazy people carved that path out, and changed the entire industry. And it's funny, you and I see this, we note this, but you say that to a lot of these people. And I mean, I haven't had the chance to say it to Dave, but Jerry Seinfeld said it to him on his appearance on My Next Guest. He said, "You changed
Yeah.
TV forever," and Dave didn't even want to hear
Yeah.
it. Didn't want to hear it until Jerry said, "Well, I'm not going to say for the better." And then Dave was like, "All right, fine, fine." But they did, and here we are having a discussion about it, here in 2024, and how it's affected us, and how it's caused us that rebelliousness, again, wet cement. Um, but then this is where I find it so enjoyable, because there is no better time this week. No offense to my family, no offense to my work. There's no better time this week that I have when I'm doing something, but then you and I are doing this right now. It's the greatest thing. And I can imagine calling a game is one thing that does kind of scratch some of that, what I'm talking about now. I'm curious, does the podcast scratch it the same way? Is it
No,
similar? Is there joy there? Is it a
no.
different type? Okay. Fair enough. No,
It's
good.
it's a great promo for the podcast. You should check
Yeah,
it out, ladies and gentlemen. The
absolutely.
host hates it. The reality of the podcast is I need something out there that tells people that I could do something. I can sit and like we're doing here and have an actual conversation with people
Right.
because nobody believes it. Oh, you're a play-by-play guy. What could you
Um,
possibly do with a show or anything like that? The podcast I have found to be a bit of a chore.
okay.
Um, I've really enjoyed talking to some people, though. You were a great guest. Chrissy, who does repurposes old time radio shows, was a
Genius.
fabulous guest. She was actually the first
Genius.
person I talked to,
Yep.
but she
It's a
got bumped twice for you, and then um, for other people.
yeah.
But the podcast is really just it's a resume almost to me. And the first season is coming to a close. I'm going to try to get to 10 episodes.
Yep.
And then once the sports season kicks up, there'll be a pause, and then next summer I'll see if I still need to scratch that itch or not. But I'm glad something is out there. One of the reasons why I've been dismayed by it is I don't think it's very good.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
had this whole goal to present myself as something other than a sports broadcaster, and I'm not happy with it. So that kind of sticks with you. But when you do these shows, you just have to do them. And if the audience likes it and the audience responds to it, great. But you have to keep going, even if they don't, and try to be better for the next one. Every talk show host on the planet, including Dave, says that. You just have to keep going and try to be better and learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the podcast is I do not have the same passion for it as the sports. But I would like to do something other than sports. I just don't quite know what that is yet. And maybe I should at 42 years old. I also will say that if all I ever end up doing is sports, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's a great life. I've built a life for myself here. Um, Professionally, I'm extremely happy with, and people are extremely happy with me. So it's not like I'm trying to chase something. I just, I like to do different things. I'm very much like Craig Ferguson in a way,
Mm-hmm.
where, Craigie gets so bored so easily
Mm-hmm.
and he gets rambunctious and he's got to do other things. And that's kind of how I am. Um, and I just if it happens, it happens. But I also don't feel like I got to blow things up the way that Craig sometimes I think does blow things up. I don't feel that need. I love being a sports broadcaster.
Yeah, it's so funny hearing your perspective on this, Chris. And I think you have the right perspective in the sense of the humbleness part, and whether or not, that's a direct Letterman reference or not, the self-deprecation. I love your show. Now I listen, I've been a podcast fan from near the beginning. Corolla was okay. But it was Kevin Smith who really, and he kind of started around the same time. Kevin Smith was really early. He was a real early adopter of this stuff. And
Yeah.
so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed Rogan almost, I won't say from the beginning, but within the first 100 episodes anyway. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and sometimes they're ones that just, limited series ones and whatnot, but I have a lot of podcasts that are in my ether, and it's the vast majority of the stuff I consume is podcasts. Podcasts have screwed me over for TV series. Like, hey, have you seen this one? No, I haven't yet. Someone said to me the other day, you seen Scandal? No, I haven't seen Scandal. I watched The Bear late, like really late. Game of Thrones really late. Part of it because podcasts are kind of my thing. I love your podcast, like love with a capital L. I think you're fantastic at it. I think it's a genius premise, a podcast about podcasts. So you're getting to pick the brains of all these people with all these different experiences from all these different vantage points. And I
Mhm.
love every single episode you've put out there. I think you are fantastic. You asked because of the experience that you've had, the entrepreneur one. Like I love you picking the brains of guys who have startups and things that are, starting to blossom for them and whatnot, because you can come in with your entrepreneurial experience and bring that to the table, but also you don't leave the layman behind. You do a really, really good job of making these conversations accessible to
Mike, you're
the
making
listener.
me sick here.
Yeah, I know,
Honest to
I know,
God,
I
this
know.
is
But
just
I just got to tell you, it's a really great episode. I really, really like your show a lot. I love the premise, and I think you do a really, really good job with it. And you got a good
I
voice
think I'm
for it. Yeah.
I'm agitated because my personal life is going very poorly, and I'm kind of in the stages of like total collapse with my personal life, and I'm bringing that into the podcast,
Yes,
and
and
that's
I love
really
it.
what's irritating. Yeah, well, great, you love
I
it.
sent
That's
you a
good.
message.
My
Hey man,
heart's about to explode, Mike, but I'm glad you're enjoying it. No, when I listen to the episodes, and I do listen to them.
oh, isn't that painful? Isn't that the worst?
Yeah.
It's the
Ugh, it
worst.
really is.
Oh my god.
But I can tell when I haven't slept for days and when I'm well rested. And there's a massive difference in my view in the quality. Now,
Oh, interesting.
again, going back to that chaos,
Yeah.
I really love Jack Parr.
Yeah.
Jack Parr, I probably relate to maybe as much as Dave because he was very much chaos. And when things were chaotic around him and he would get mad and things like that, I loved that. That is great TV
Yep.
to me.
Yep.
That what is happening here? And Jack Parr
Absolutely.
was so wonderful at that while being so, for the time, very hip and cool. Although if you heard David Letterman's story about going to his house, it's hysterical. But anyways, um, now I lost my train of thought.
No, the
But
chaos,
anyways,
the
so
chaos.
I don't know. Maybe the chaos in my personal life that I am bringing into the podcast is good, and I just can't realize it because it's making me miserable. But that's kind of what I guess I hope is what's happening. Um,
As a listener,
uh,
it makes me relate to you more. I get your phone number, so it's easy for me to text you. Hey, brother, hope things are going better this week. And I,
You do that too, by the way.
oh,
Mike
yeah.
really, really has been doing that. He started as a guest on my show and he said, we're going to be friends. And I've said that to a few of my guests and then I haven't heard from them again. But for Mike, he literally does. He is a wonderful, kind man who I do feel like I'm your friend now.
Oh,
It's
100%.
crazy.
100%.
Yeah.
And for me, like you putting that in there, it's what all of the podcasts that I love who have a host, as opposed to, where it's a specific subject or fiction or anything like that. Like I'm saying, where it's a back and forth, where there's a talk element to it. The hosts that are vulnerable and bring in their stuff are the ones that I gravitate towards too. Like I love that about Dave. Dave, I love every single interview he ever did. Love them all. Like from Barbara Walters, even the Oprah ones. The more plasticky ones. Um, Watching him with Bob Costas back in the day. Okay, and
Oh, yeah.
you watch the one on Don Giller's channel where he has it where it's the entire feed, including like between commercial breaks and stuff like that.
Yes.
Like that is one of the coolest guys I've ever seen in my life. And I mean, I smoke cigars. I've got a humidor upstairs with 75 Cuban cigars in it. And I always, because I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world, watching Dave
It's
not
not.
give a shit about what Costas was saying and holding a cigar. Like I love the vibe. I love all of that. And he
Yeah.
did, to take this back to the point we were talking about, Dave did some interviews every now and then, but the vast majority of his career, he chose anything that was happening. Let's put it on the show. Let's talk about it in the
Hmm.
show. Let's do it that way. And I think that what we're talking about here is another kind of version of that. Obviously, not nearly as awesome as Dave and all that. Again, Neil Brennan in the mothership, right? Chris Chris and Mike in the escape pod. But I
Yeah.
think that the sentiment is the same. And I think that's one of the reasons why I connect. I didn't connect with any of your sports stuff. I'd never heard of you before that, but I've listened to every episode, a couple of them twice. The one on the guy who was the entrepreneur. Um,
Yeah,
the
he's
AI
great.
stuff. Oh,
I was
my
mad
wife's.
at him. I was really mad at him after I did that interview because I thought he was doing too much self-promoting. But when I went back and listened to it, I was like, wow, this is maybe the best one we did.
Oh man,
And it's really
yep.
interesting to have that perspective when you're a broadcaster and you do something that you think is terrible, and then you go back and it's like, oh no. Katie Mack, who I also
Oh, I love
loved to
that
death.
episode. Oh my God.
I thought that was the best one we did, and then I went back and listened to it, and I was like, I don't like this at all.
Oh, is
So
that
it's
probably
very interesting.
because you were so vulnerable, right? You didn't like it because of
Yeah,
you, right?
I was
Yeah.
not in good shape during that episode.
Yeah, and see, the listener who doesn't know you doesn't know that. You know that. Like, okay, you want to know, you want to know how God has a sense of humor? You know, man plans, God laughs. I'll tell you. Here's how. The guy who desperately wanted the Letterman podcast forever, like from the beginning, like before Letterman went off the air. This guy here who wanted it probably more than anybody to be able to come in and listen once a week to a podcast devoted to anything around the topic of David Letterman. I was that guy. Now imagine being
Mhm.
that guy, and you have amazing conversations with O'Donnell or Young or some of these Wine or some of these older people around, Don Giller for that matter, all that, and the content is there that you want, but the thing that breaks it up is you, and it's terrible. Like it's a form of hell. That's God laughing like crazy because I cannot stand to go back, but I do because I love what the
Yeah,
guest is saying so much. And that is
right.
so I'm in my own version of hell. Thank you for listening to me. You know, the doctor is in. Just invoice me for the like it's so I hear where you're coming from. I live it every day, but I've had to say screw it and just let it go, and I'm gonna try and do the best that I possibly can. And
It's,
but
it's again going back to what is the goal, and if the goal is to try to entertain people, you have to do that at all costs, and that
hmm,
means you have to bring a part of yourself into it. And I mean, some of the later Letterman memories, some of the best episodes or some of the best rants he had about like the Eagles song and
oh, I
trying to
love
get
that.
the Eagles song
Yeah,
and just stuff like that.
railroaded the whole
It was
show. I love that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so expressing your frustrations and being who you are is really, really important in broadcasting. And again, I just can't emphasize that enough because so many people just want to be a robot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny. Two times I saw the show live. Once was a month before he retired. Once was, I believe it was in '04. And both episodes that I was on, I'm certain a top 10 was written. I never got to see a top 10 live. And I'm certain a top 10 was written, but both episodes were just after the Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I should say. And Dave sat there
Warren Zevon.
lamenting. What words about? Yeah, Dave sat there lamenting the fact that Paul and the
Keep
band are not in
keep
the Rock and
going.
Roll.
I'm
Yeah, I
gonna
will. I absolutely will. Lamenting the fact that Paul and the band were not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and was so angry about it. Oh, there we go. Oh, Adam Unger, there
enjoy
you go. Enjoy every
enjoy every
sandwich.
sandwich there. All right, let me hang it back up now,
No,
Mike.
no, no,
I
no.
got
That's
laundry to
amazing.
do here, buddy. I
So
got laundry.
I wanted to create for Rupert's last year. I wanted to create a T-shirt that just simply said the Hello Deli, enjoy every sandwich. To me, putting those things together would have been a really neat little mashup, like if you know, you know, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. I thought that would have been
Yeah,
a really
right.
cool thing, but it never happened. Rupert sold the deli instead. So, but anyway, you know, seeing him talk about real life stuff, the story about the bear, you know, the thing that happened, you know, and I mean, obviously the rougher stuff too, but like my favorite run in all of, and I love it all, including I want to talk to you about my next guest here in a second before we turn this one off. But my favorite run of Letterman in history was in 2010 when Late Shift 2 was happening. And you know, and his every single night, like every single night, and I mean they had prepared comedy pieces that are sitting there. No, we're not getting to them. Don't know if they ever did. If it's in the vault somewhere, I want to see them. Like, oh my god, like I talked to some of the writers, like I talked to Steve Young about some of the stuff that's been produced that has never seen the light of day. There's so much of it, Chris.
I bet. Yeah.
Like you know, but again, love that stuff. It's amazing. The Bays Thomas stuff they would produce, all that stuff is great. But when Dave would ignore that and go off on a tangent, that's my favorite. That's my favorite moment in all of TV that week when he did that. And he did that every single night in 2010.
It was wonderful. And it must have been so, again, for the Rebel to have that justification that everything worked out. You didn't get the Tonight Show, but everything worked out. And that must have been just so gratifying. And poor Conan, he got like $30 million to leave. I mean, give me $30 million and I will be up in the woods somewhere, and you will literally never see me. Nobody ever will again, as long as Amazon can get there. But jeez, but for somebody who's rebellious, somebody who's taking a chance to have that affirmation, to have it all come back like, it must have been so relieving. And you can see the joy in him. And to Dave's credit, he did a great job with Conan when Conan came on the show, just like he did with Jon Stewart when Jon Stewart's show got canceled, and he kind of took him under his wing and had him on the production company, kept him employed before the Daily Show happened. Yep. Dave's really, really good at that. And I know he had a lot of fun with that. We all had a lot of fun with that, but the heart was there, for Dave. And oh my God, but you're right. Exactly. A perfect example of just going off the rails the way that he would. I'm waiting for them to post this, the story about the bear getting into the cabin.
I think it's on. I think it's there. I think
it's on there, but there was a Family Guy animator who created a cartoon of it.
I'll send it to you. I've got it.
You got it? Oh, thank God. Somebody,
if you go back into the Facebook group, the Letterman Podcast Facebook group, and God damn it, go there right now.
I'm not on Facebook.
Not you. I know you're not. We did post it. Vinny Favale was a part of that and made it happen. So Vinny Favale, between Howard Stern and Letterman.
Was he on Family Guy? Was I right about that?
No, but I think there was that's a good question. I should ask Vinny that. We should ask Vinny that, actually. Anyway, he ended up sending it to me. It wasn't Checky that sent it to me. It was him. And we posted it. We did post it in the Facebook group way back, but maybe I'll find it and post it again. That cartoon was fantastic.
For folks who have never seen this cartoon,
yep,
the dog bowl, the name of Regis on it, that's the whole story is great. And a lot of Letterman fans will know the bear story, but the animation and the dog bowl with Regis on it, that was a perfect touch.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was every bit as good as like the TV Funhouse that we do on Saturday Night Live, Smigel's little cartoons and things like that. It felt a little like that. It was such a great little thing. I'll find it. I've got it somewhere. I've got it on a hard drive or something, and I'll get it to you. I'm super curious, Chris, what your take is, because it's funny talking to some of the folks either who worked for Dave or were close to him, and then talking to them about my next guest, and they're not as connected to it. They get around to it. Some of them watch it immediately, that kind of a thing, but many don't. I'm curious what your take is on my next guest.
I couldn't hear for a second there, Mike, just because I live in downtown Cleveland. You got to deal with some sirens every once in a while. But that's really interesting to hear that, though, that they have that feeling, because I have that feeling too. And I'm sure Dave would probably say, hey, it's just something to get out of the house. What do I care? At this point in his life, at least I hope he would say that. There have been some that I really, really enjoyed.
Yep.
The Jay-Z one was awesome.
It's one of my favorites.
Absolutely. And him and Letterman talk about infidelity in a very vulnerable way. Was really cool to watch. But some of them, I did like the Lizzo one too. Just watching her perform with a flute. Like, who the hell knew that?
Yep.
So there are some good ones, but ever since they started posting on the Letterman channel, that's kind of where my attention lies. I'm interested to see. I kind of pick and choose my next guest. There's some guests who I just am not interested in. I love the Howard one.
Do you have one that you've that as an example? I skipped that one intentionally because I wasn't interested in the guest.
Not off the top of my head, because I probably forgot.
Kim Kardashian, Billie Eilish.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Kanye West, I think, was one of them.
Yep.
I,
Fascinating.
yeah, I just,
They're both fascinating, and it's funny. But you know, it's I'm not saying that they're necessarily accessible, but one of the things that I do love about it is Dave being interested in, let's take Billie Eilish for example. You've got this person who's a pop singing icon right now, and Dave, you can tell there's genuine curiosity, like
mhm.
genuine curiosity as to what it is that makes this person tick, what it is that has connected this person to so many millions of people, tens of millions of people, and has the everyman perspective. And it's funny, and it's the opposite of Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson was like, and Dave probably feels this way that Carson did, but like everybody in show business is gone, you know, because he thought about, you know, the Sinatras and all the people like that,
Yeah,
right? The Jack Bennys and the,
right.
you know, and he didn't get it anymore interviewing Tom Cruise at that time. You know, but Dave has gone the opposite way, and he's gotten curious about the people who are in the world's eye at this point here, and comes at it with an everyman perspective. The Miley Cyrus episode that just came out is fantastic. I think you'll gravitate more to the Charles Barkley one.
Oh,
You
I
know, for
love Sir
obvious.
Charles. I
Did you
do.
see that episode
I
yet?
honestly, no, I haven't watched any of them, but I am excited for. I like Miley Cyrus. I'm fascinated by Miley Cyrus. She's got that kind of brooding artist quality to her that I find
Mm-hmm.
extremely attractive. So
Mm-hmm.
I am looking forward to that one. She's a tortured soul, you could tell, and I love getting to know those people. You know, it's interesting. I thought about the Malala one, and I was like, I didn't get a lot out of that one either,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel terrible for saying that. This girl is just trying to raise awareness and do the right things and all of those things, but I don't know. I feel like I get enough of that with the news, and I
Yeah.
know what's going on in the world, and it's just not something that I want for my entertainment. But you know, she's, you know, takes nothing away from her. Of course, I'm
Nope.
rooting for her, and she's in danger, and she's fighting for her life, and all of these things just to give herself a voice. That's a heroic person. But as far as entertainment goes, you know, I'd rather watch, you know, Jerry as Janet Reno. That's how I get entertainment.
I love
Um,
that you love
but
Mulligan so much. I'm gonna send him a note and let him know, because you mentioned it in our episode too. And he is, oh, he's a hell of a guy, effortlessly funny. Like I'm just
is he
saying,
like
like
7 feet tall too?
he's a big man. He's got presence. Jerry
Yeah,
Mulligan's got presence for sure. Like even at, you know, this age, that's what, like it just. But oh my god, like effortlessly, like it just pours out of him. Just him existing pours out of him. We did an episode with him and Jeff Martin at the same time, and it was so fun to watch those two play off each other.
yeah,
And there was 3 or 4
yeah.
times watching it back. Again, I have to watch it back, even though I hate myself watching myself on there. Um, 3 or 4 times throughout that episode, he made jokes that nobody got, and it was just so funny watching them just roll out of him, and they just went right over all of our
Yeah.
heads. You know, it was just Jerry Mulligan. Yeah, shout out to Jerry Mulligan. Um, this is why we do the show right here. It's a celebration of the greatest body of broadcast work in history. That's our tagline, and I'm really, really grateful to have you here today. We're going to move towards the close, and I'm open ended as to how long the close will take. Other moments that you loved, other things that you want to get out there before we do move to the close. Anything come to mind?
Um, you know, it's really interesting how just little moments uh, take us to where we are in our lives, and it's fun to kind of look back. I'm somebody who lives in the past and I live in the future,
Mm.
and I'm very rarely in the present. This whole time we've been doing this interview, I've been thinking about, when's this going to be posted? What are the comments going to be like? Who's going to actually watch me? Who
Oh,
cares
so
about what
easy,
I
so
have to
easy.
say?
Friday and nobody and nothing. That's the answers to those 2 questions. Friday and don't worry
That's
about it.
exactly what's in my head.
Friday and don't
But
worry about it. That's all.
it's just really interesting going back to, you know, 1995, 1994, sitting on the couch with my dad watching David Letterman, and here I am 20 well, no, 30 years later, talking about a broadcasting career, talking to my new friend in Canada, who's also a Letterman fan, on this computer device that allows us
Yeah.
to connect this way. It's I'm going to turn into Bill Walton for a moment here, but it's really cool to have that perspective and to see how we go around the sun 30 times and it leads to this moment, and what a
Yeah.
beautiful thing that is. And we owe it all to a late night TV show
Yes.
that means the world to us and so many other fans. And how special is that we can have that, and that we know there's other people out there who have that too.
Holy crap. It's like you're a professional, Chris. Man, that was very well put. That was
I'm
very,
not
very,
paid like
very
one.
that was very well put. Have you seen the new Inside Out yet? Have you ever watched Inside Out, the Pixar movie?
My girlfriend, I think she's still my girlfriend. We have
Yeah.
to check in once a week
Good.
to make sure. But but we watched the first one together. She had already seen it, and I loved it. I think it's one of the I love animation, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
and then just the way it was done. It's brilliant. It's really brilliant. So I'm looking forward to the second one. But going out to a theater with people, I'll wait until I can click a couple buttons and then watch it at home, where I have my own popcorn and my kitty cat can be on my lap.
Yeah. Okay. You feel the way that I figured you would about the first one. I wasn't sure if you'd seen the second one yet.
Yeah.
We took our 6-year-old granddaughter to it, and it was the most amazing thing. After we finished watching it, she's 6 and she's in the back seat, and for a half hour afterwards, talking to us, having this amazing conversation about emotions and what emotions mean, and
Yeah.
all of this sort of stuff. And the second one, every bit as insightful as the first one, just with different emotions. Well, the reason I bring it up is there's a scene. It happens 2 or 3 times. It's a little running joke, and I'm not spoiling anything. The new emotions are in, and they're wreaking havoc inside the brain of this teenager. But every once in a while, the door opens and another emotion walks in, and they're like, "We're not ready for you yet. Get out." And that emotion is nostalgia. It's nostalgia. Nostalgia comes in, and they're like, "Get out of here!" It's this old lady, and she comes in. "Remember when Riley did this?" And they're get out of here. Get out of here. I feel like I feel like for me, nostalgia entered my mind way prematurely. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I was 19 years old, nostalgic about stuff that happened on late night, even though I'm now watching Late Show. And I was just SNL is the same thing. Actually, you watch with your dad. I was just talking to Jed from Late Nighter and his son, and we were talking about recently there was a sketch. Kristen Wiig came on and did a Five Timers Club sketch. And it was so cool talking to his son, who's obsessed with SNL, who's a teenager. And I'm telling him about the very first Five Timers sketch with Tom Hanks back in the day. And I was like basically his age when that first Five Timers Club episode happened. And Paul Simon and Steve Martin were the people who were in the club at
Yeah.
that point.
Right.
And it's just nostalgia for this stuff. People call it silly. David Letterman being the first one to call it silly. He said, "No, there's nothing sacred on TV." The idea that we can go, okay, feel that way. That's why you're you. Please keep being you, because we fucking love it. But
Yep.
we're going to respectfully disagree about that and choose to play and live in these moments that were formative for us. That's why one of the reasons why you and I are connected. That's why we're friends. And I just want to say thank you
Right.
for not just being a straight-laced broadcaster. Thank you for being somebody that is going to be a light bulb moment for somebody who watches or listens to you and says, "Oh, I can color outside the lines a little bit." That rebellious spirit.
Right.
And again, thank you for your show. I don't know, 10 episodes this season. That's fine. Whatever. I'm subscribed. I'm going to listen to every single one you put out. I think it's a genius premise. I hope you keep at it, because I don't want someone to take your premise. I was just talking to the founder of podmatch.com, which is an amazing thing. And we're talking about your podcast. He was immediately interested in your podcast because the concept is amazing. And I hope you learned some great stuff. I hope that, we stay connected. And I just want to say thank you so much for reaching out originally for me and having me as a guest on your show. It was an incredible honor. I can't thank you enough, Chris. Thank you for everything that you are.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thanks for having me on your podcast. Once again, this will be the lowest rated one, so I appreciate you taking a dive for me.
Hey, no problem at all. Darren Cox will be really excited about that because his is. No, I'm just kidding. don't.
I looked at the numbers. I did. That's the kind of anxious I am. I was like, let's see.
Oh,
His
here's
wife
the.
got his wife's up to this point. I don't know if
Oh,
I'm gonna get there.
oh, Candy. People love. It's funny. The people who will reach out after Candy comes on any of the shows, because she's come on, I think 4 times now, and it's always after a major Letterman trip of some sort. A couple of them she was on, a couple of them was after the fact, and she would kind of ask me about it. And I get different people who reach out and watch it. People who are like Letterman staffers, who are more excited for the episodes where she comes on. And that says something, and it's not surprising, of course. But yeah,
Yeah.
no. Here's the beautiful thing about this. This is why, there's a quote from Once Upon a Time in Mexico. I don't know if it's Johnny Depp who said it, but one of them said, "The man who wants nothing is invincible." And when it comes to the numbers on this, I don't care. Like I
Yeah. Good
don't.
for you.
I care about this. This is the part
Good
that
for
I
you.
love. This is the part I love. And someday, if somebody comes along and says, "Hey, you know what? I'm a marketing guy and I'm going to show you how you can take this from this." Okay, great. If it doesn't
Right.
happen, okay, great, because this is the part I love, as opposed to the numbers and things like that. So I want to talk to the interesting folks, who have an interest in this stuff as well. And I always said from the very beginning, there's 3 types of guests that we're going to have on the show. Obviously, people who are involved with the one of the broadcasts of Letterman. That's obviously people who are either have guested on the show or are tangentially connected. Like, here's a good example: Bill Oakley, who was a showrunner for The Simpsons for a long time. He's coming on the show in a
Yeah.
couple weeks here. Okay.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Did he? Oh, yes. See, you get it. You get it. Like, did he ever work for Letterman? No. But there's a lot of very cool connections that are there, and there's a lot of really
Right.
cool things that we're going to be able to talk about when it comes to this stuff. And the third, of course, is it, and that kind of dovetails to people like yourself, the enthusiast community, people who have been affected by this stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, those are the 3 major types of guests we want to have on this show. And I don't care if that plays with what's popular and what's rising and trending and all of that crap. I don't care, because I think all 3 of those people will help create this anecdotal archive that we're creating. Also, I could be full of crap. I'm a financial planner. What the hell do I know about this? I don't know. But what I do know is I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I know you've enjoyed talking to this. This is our 2nd time doing this, and
Yeah.
we both love it and get that feeling. And I hope that your evening is going to be a hell of a lot better than it would have been had we not done this, my friend.
Well, the cat is awake now, so that means it's definitely time to go, Mike. But
Time
I
to go.
really enjoyed it as always. It was a blast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. My best to Meepy over there. This has been another. Oh, the Letterman Podcast has one sponsor only, and that is Rupert G and the Hello Deli. He may have sold the deli, but hello-deli.com is still alive and well. If you want something,
Yeah.
we got mugs. Yeah, Late Show with David Letterman mugs. The only place to get any official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise is Rupert G. hello-deli.com. Head on over there. Unfortunately, you don't get the Warren Zevon shirt that Chris has there. His name is Chris Schieman. My name is Mike Chisholm. This has been another episode of the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.